Hey everybody, welcome back to Knife Knife. We are on an episode that I am super excited about. Today we are working with grapefruit. I'm super excited about this because I absolutely love grapefruit. It is my favorite produce. It's so fucking delicious. It's so good. It's one of those foods that people tend to be really divided on. Either they love it or they hate it. There's not really any middle ground. And within the people who love it, there's sort of two camps. And there are people who eat it with salt and people who eat it with sugar. I'm one of the people who eats it with salt. So good. A little bit about grapefruit itself. Grapefruit is not found in just naturally in nature. It was created in the late 18th century, I believe. And it's a hybrid of pomelos and a type of orange. I can't remember the type of orange it is. But anyways, we get this guy. And this is a very bitter citrus. It's not sour like lemons are. It's bitter. And so one of the reasons it's really great with salt is when salt hits your tongue, it can prevent you from being able to taste bitterness. And so with this being a particularly bitter citrus, when you add salt to it, you're really just being able to taste the grapefruit flavor itself without the bitterness there. That's to say, you can't have sugar with it. It's still really good. In a restaurant that I worked in, they used to do bruleed grapefruit wedges. Beautiful, so good. But if you add a little salt to it, it balances that flavor so much more. So you're not having to use as much sugar to cover up the bitterness because sugar does not prevent you from tasting bitter. We're going to be working on a recipe today that kind of combines those two things, which I'm really excited about and sort of inspired by the restaurant that I used to work for. And we'll be doing a salad as well. Another thing I'm super excited for. It's going to be so good. I'm going to chow down. I even bought extra grapefruit today so I can just make more of this stuff again after I'm done filming so that I can continue eating it because I fucking love grapefruit, you guys. So good. Let's get started. Our first recipe is going to be super simple. All you need is grapefruit, salt, and sugar. And that is it. Oh my God, you guys. So fucking simple. First, you want to make sure that you remove any stickers. Put those in your trash bowl. Next thing, and I recommend doing this anytime you're doing grapefruit for breakfast, is you just take a thin slice like that off of either side. And then you take a cut right down the middle. Just trying to make it as even as possible. And that way, by cutting the ends off, your grapefruit are stable and they're not just wobbling around everywhere, making a fucking mess. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to put my paring knife into the outside and I'm just going to slowly cut around the perimeter where the fruit meets the pith. I'll be able to tell when I get back to my original cut because it will be really loose. Next, if you can see, we have all these lines where it separates the wedges of fruit from each other. The supreme. So we're going to start in the middle and then just work our way and then just cut back all the way around. And we will do this with each one on both sides. Okay, and again, I'll know when I've gone all the way back around because they get really loose. So both sides are done. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take just a pinch of salt and I'm going to sprinkle it high above so that we get an even layer of salt all around the grapefruit. Depending on what camp you're in, if you like the sugar, you like the salt, This is gonna like vary depending on how much salt you want to put on there. So you do not have to put on as much salt as I am putting on currently. I just absolutely love salt on my grapefruit. It's so good because I love the grapefruit flavor, and all that salt allows me to taste that because I'm not tasting the bitterness. So with this recipe, we're utilizing both. And I'm gonna really generously cover the top in sugar. So you would be able to see a pretty thick layer. Like, as you can tell, it is no longer just pink. There are a couple of different varieties of grapefruits. So you can find grapefruits that have like a white flesh. You can have grapefruits that have a pink flesh, like these guys. Some, they're called ruby red grapefruits. They're like really, really deep red color. They're so beautiful. I think that's another thing I love about grapefruit is they're just like a beautiful fruit to look at. The color variations are just gorgeous. So yeah, there's a ton of varieties out there, but the kind that you find at a conventional grocery store, they're gonna be pretty bitter. So this is a good way to organize that. I should say really quickly, if you do not have a broiler on your oven, this recipe probably won't work, but if you have a blowtorch, you can still do it. So I have the grapefruits on a tray now, and we are going to put them in the broiler. If you go down to this part of your oven, and this is what I mean by broiler. Some people have like storage for more pots and pans down there. I have fire. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grab this guy and I'm gonna put it down here under this fire. And I'm gonna close it. And then I'm gonna put a timer on. I'm gonna just start it for 3 minutes. All right, so our timer just went off. And we're just gonna check our things doing. So looks like they're doing okay. It's just starting to get hot down there, so we are going to put our timer on for 5 minutes. And we'll see how that goes. Our timer has ended. We are going to check on our little guys down here. This is a good place to be. We're starting to get some browning. You can see like it's sort of shriveled up a little bit because the liquid has evaporated, so the supremes are separating from one another. This is where I like it. Close this guy. If you had a blowtorch, you could use that to caramelize the sugar and make it nice and hard and like crack. This was a really good way to just like melt. We'll make sure to turn that off. You don't want to leave the broiler on. Just to really melt the sugar into the grapefruit itself. Now it's a fucking hot breakfast and it's gonna be well balanced. While we were waiting for the grapefruits to finish in the broiler, I got out some other ingredients. For this next recipe, we are going to be using the sugar and the salt still, but we're also going to be using a little bit of oil, some fresh ginger, and some fresh mint. These guys are plated. You obviously can use a regular spoon to do this, but I have one of these super awesome grapefruit spoons that have these serrated edges that help you get the grapefruit out. And another thing that's great about like cutting the bottom off is now when I'm trying to scoop it out, it's not going to be an issue trying to do that. It's so good. I know it may seem weird to have warm citrus, but it's super delicious. Having the grapefruit warmed like that with the broiler is just like a really awesome new way to experience this produce. It's still like so good. With the salt and the sugar, you're just like getting this really well balanced flavor. You're getting a little bit of sweetness, but that bitterness is like cut through with the salt. I love doing these for brunches, so I probably wouldn't use the broiler if I was just making this for myself. But if I was making brunch for me and another person or me and a group of people, this is like a really easy, awesome new thing that like you probably haven't seen people do. All right, so moving on to our next recipe. This one is great because you don't have to cook anything. Haha. So we're starting off, we're going to be cutting both ends of the grapefruit. And we're peeling it this way for a very specific reason. We want to cut all the way, and we're just cutting so that it curves. You see? So it comes off like that. Because when you are cutting it like this, you're removing all of the pith. So the pith is this white part, and that is the most bitter part of the grapefruit. So we're just being super careful to get rid of all of that when you're cutting it. And it seems wasteful, but it's completely worth it to get all of that out. Trash bowl. Next thing I'm gonna do is, you see here, there are these lines of membrane that are separating each. So we want to cut those out at a diagonal angle, and we're going to pull out each supreme. And that's what these little sections are called. And if I can cut the membrane out, I want to make sure I'm doing that. And it's going to get real juicy. And just make sure you're careful not to push so hard that you go through and you cut your hand. So you definitely have to be careful, especially when you get near the end. And we're using a paring knife or any kind of small knife. I wouldn't recommend doing this with like a, oh no, we've got runaway juice. I would not recommend doing this with like a large chef's knife. Now you can leave these supremes whole like this, or you can cut them up, like cut them in half. I like to leave them whole. I think it's like a really lovely presentation. And I'm just gonna do one more. I'm not gonna do 3. And so see, when I did it this time, I kind of missed some of the pith. I wanna get all that off. I do not want any pith. Things that you figure out while you're doing stuff. I could have been doing this over the bowl the whole time and saving all of that fruit. Just make sure to grab any seeds out that you might miss. And the rest of this is gonna be super, super easy. I would start with a little less than 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Remember, I like to do salt to taste, so you can start with a pinch and add more if you want. 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then I'm gonna take a few mint leaves, taking some of the larger ones. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm just gonna like very thinly cut them with my scissors. And the stems I will toss into trash bowl. I'm just going to take a tiny bit of ginger. So here I just have like just a little baby bit. And I'm just gonna grate that on the smallest one. I'm not gonna worry about peeling it because, as you can see, usually the peel just sort of ends up like that. And at the end, I just want like this small amount. So we're looking at like 1/4 teaspoon of fresh ginger. And then I just like to add a little oil for some fat. I'm just doing a little less than 1/2 teaspoon. I'm gonna drizzle that all over. So then I'm just gonna quickly toss this stuff all together. So we have both salt and sugar on here. So I'm going to just keep tossing this because I really want to toss it until it is like dissolved and fully coating all the grapefruit. I have a lot of juice in this one because I cut it over the bowl because I love the juice. That's my favorite part. It doesn't look as pretty, so maybe cut it over another bowl if you're trying to like, you know, make a presentation out of this and you're making it to seduce some friends, or like not seduce in a sexual, or I mean in a sexual way, that's totally appropriate, but also seduce and like into friendship. Oh, I would add more salt because I love salt. That's so good. So here we are. I poured out a little bit of the juice so we could see it a little bit better. After it's done mixing, you can also add some more leaves for garnish. Here we are. This is our simple grapefruit salad. It's super lovely. It's really fresh. It's just like, this would be a really, really, really great summer item. Like when you don't want to have your oven on, like in the summer, it's just too hot. Down below, I'm going to have a link to my Instagram. I also do a cook along every Sunday. The time changes, but the day is always the same. I try to do it at different times so different people have the option of joining. I will post the ingredient list for that cook-along on Monday. So by the following Sunday, you'll have time to gather those ingredients and we can all cook together. So if you make this, make sure to tag me on Instagram and show me how you made it. If you added anything to this salad, I would love to see what you did. Yeah, tag me. I'd love to see your guys' stuff. Anyway,